Hello, I'm Andy Agathangelo. I'm very proud to be the founder of the Transparency Task Force. We're a certified social enterprise that's based in the UK, but we have people in 20 countries around the world who get our regular weekly newsletter called the Transparency Times. As a certified social enterprise, we are hardwired to the idea of bringing about reform of the financial sector. We want the financial industry to be more transparent, more truthful, more trustworthy. We work hard in many, many ways to try to bring about the kind of changes that we need. And to be very frank with you, a lot of our work at the moment is trying to get the regulators to regulate effectively. We think that the regulatory framework is a weak link in the chain. We believe that if regulators are not regulating effectively and enforcing effectively and using their powers effectively, there is, in effect, an advertisement sent out to bad actors to say, come and do your bad deeds, and there's only a teeny tiny chance that you'll get caught. Effectively, we are promoting the idea that the financial scam industry, and in fact, the scam industry more generally, is a safe place to make a lot of money if you've got criminal intent. So, a little bit about our event tonight. Online fraud and scams have exploded into the most reported crime worldwide, with a staggering, and it is staggering, $1 trillion lost annually. $1 trillion. That's a million, no, is it a million billion? Some crazy number. It's an absolutely huge, huge number. Perpetrators face less than a 0.05% chance of being caught. So one in, let's say, 200, I think that is. Scams have become a low risk, high reward industry. Tonight, we'll be hearing from George Abraham. George is the managing director of the Global Anti-Scam Alliance, and he also runs Scam Advisor. Please do tell us about both of those organizations, George. He'll be sharing his latest thoughts on what the landscape looks like globally and letting us into his thinking around what more could and should be done to try to fight this terrible, terrible situation that we've got. Just before I pass over to George, I want to take a moment to reflect because this is the last Transparency Task Force meeting of the year. And I want to share something with you. I'm going to share this with you. Not that, I'm going to share this with you. This is our event calendar for 2024. So back on the 30th of January 2024, we ran what turned out to be a particularly important event. What are the similarities between the FCA and the Post Office? Way back in 2024, beginning of the year. We ran another one on the 6th of February, another one on the 12th of March, 26th of March, 30th of April, 14th of May, 18th of June, 9th of July, 30th of July, 27th of August, 3rd of September, 10th of September, 17th of September, 24th September, another one on the 24th of September, two in one day. 8th of October, we ran an event called Rinsed From Cartels to Crypto, how the tech industry washes money for the world's deadliest crooks. 17th of October, an event about how financial services firms can harness more value in values and why they must, etc. An event on the 22nd of October, the 5th of November, 12th of November, 3rd December, 10th December, that's last week's event, the book club event, all about downward spiral, collapsing public standards and how to restore them. Ladies and gentlemen, I first started running events way, way back in 1987. Gosh, that's a long time ago. I know how much work they take to organize and to make work well. And these days, to be frank with you, I have hardly anything to do with running Transparency Task Force's events program. And the reason I have hardly anything to do with it is because we have Alexandra Zitkus, who's here with us tonight, behind her TTF icon, her screen save, who runs it all for us. So can we please take the opportunity to thank Alexandra for running the events that she has all through 2024, and also we're looking forward to the ones you're going to be running in 2025 as well for us, Alexandra. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure she'll say hi very, very briefly later on. Thanks, Alexandra. You really do amazing work, and the work that you do in teamwork with Chelsea, just absolutely outstanding. You know what, folks? People just don't believe there's only me and Alexandra and Chelsea working part-time. TTF really does do such a huge amount of work because we're becoming an increasingly effective team. We have lots of volunteers helping us as well, and we are fighting well and truly above our weight. So again, Alexandra, thank you very much. Somebody else who fights well above his weight is George. George, please take that as an opportunity to introduce yourself. I know some folks here have heard you speak before at the previous event we ran, but some haven't. So assume a starting knowledge of zero. Please do tell everybody a bit about yourself and what you do, why you do it, and how people could try to help themselves from being scammed in the future, and take us into any territory you'd like to. Thank you very much indeed, George. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy, for having me. As Andy was saying, my name is George Abraham. I'm Dutch, so I realize I'm speaking for a English native audience. So already my apologies for mistreating your language. Some of you might have seen part of the presentation before, but we do have a lot of new data and also made steps towards fighting scams better. Andy, just to double check, do you see my screen?
We see your screen and your slides perfectly well. Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Then, just for the record, a small disclaimer, no artificial intelligence was used in the creation of this presentation. And some of you might at the end say, well, I'm not sure if there's any intelligence behind it. I leave it to you. But about our mission is to protect consumers worldwide from online scams. And we do that in two ways. One is the Global Anti-Scam Alliance, which is a non-profit organization where we bring together governments, law enforcement, consumer authorities, the financial sector, telecom operators, and the big tech companies to share knowledge on scams, but also really to define better solutions to protect consumers from scams. And I also run Scam Advisor, which is an online website where consumers can check if a website is legit or possibly a scam. We have more than 7 million visitors a month, but actually, more importantly, our algorithm is now used by Google, TikTok, Pinterest, a lot of antivirus companies to actively check, is this advertiser possibly malicious, or do we want to block access to this website the consumer is going to? If you'd like to check out, please feel free to check out Scam Advisor. You can type in any domain name, and we do a real-time analysis of the chance of it being legit or a scam. But we also try to explain why we think it has a high risk or a low risk. Taking one step back, I mean, we always talk about scams, but what are they? It is a weird kind of crime. We often consider it a crime, the only crime where you fall for, which is actually kind of victim blaming because the criminal is scamming us. It's not us giving voluntarily data to the criminal. The criminal is luring us, and he is the actual perpetrator. But because of the nature of scams, it's also one of the most underreported types of crime and a crime where we feel ashamed about. Um, so, and also the challenge with scams is where does bad service end and when does it become a scam? I mean, if you Google online for reviews of Apple or ASOS, you will be convinced that there are scams looking at their reviews. But I think we agree that their service might be not ideal, but they're not scams. Um, and we see a lot of issues where if you talk to a lawyer, if there's a, for example, subscription scam, you have the chance to win a Galaxy watch. But then if you scroll down 10 pages at the bottom, it says in font size 2, $80 per month. The lawyers will say it's not a scam. It's very clearly stated in the terms and conditions that you're subscribing to a service. But we as a consumer, we see only the top. Nobody goes through all the small print, and we're being scammed anyway. How we define scams is when there's a huge gap between the product or service being offered and what's actually being delivered. That's how we keep things simple for consumers. And there are many types of scams. And for the record, we've been scamming each other for thousands of years. Even the old Egyptians were already scamming each other. Archaeologists found more than 2 million sarcophagus of cats. A mummified cat would bring you good luck if you put it in front of your door. And they found more than 2 million of these statues. Most of them actually not with a body of a dead cat in it, but paper and rubbish. So even there already we were scamming each other. Nowadays on Scam Advisor, the most search for scam is online shopping scams. Is this website actually delivering a product? And in many cases, they are delivering a product. It's just not what you ordered. And the reason they're doing this is to send proof to Visa, MasterCard, PayPal that a product was actually delivered, trying to postpone the chargeback as much as possible. We also see at number 2 on Scam Advisor investment scams. And of course, many of you will say, well, these return on investments are too good to be true. But especially in developing nations, we see that people are often a victim of these kind of scams because inflation ratios are very high in these countries and the people lack the financial knowledge to recognize a real offer from one of these. However, for the record, we're just scammed as hard in Europe as well. I mean, a few years ago, there was a very popular series on Netflix called Squid Game, and and a scammer launched the Squid Game coin, offering a very good return on a game which would soon be launched by Netflix. It took Netflix 5 days to take down the website, and in the meantime, the scammer had collected 3.4 million US dollars. Of course, in some cases, we as consumers should know better. You would be amazed how many people emailed me saying, and especially students, saying, hey, I paid for my master thesis, but it was never delivered. What can I do? Well, you will never go to the police if you to complain about a weapon not being delivered or a fake PayPal account not being delivered or your driver's license not being delivered. And the scammer knows this, and unfortunately, some of us fall for these kind of scams. The gentleman amongst us, also, you would be amazed how many people emailed us this saying, is this real or is it a scam? Well, of course it's a scam. You're not being paid to watch videos. And some scams are too incredible to be true, but I mean, the victim can be groomed. There was a Japanese lady which fell for a scam where she had a relationship with a scammer. The scammer made her believe that he was actually an astronaut and needed 35,000 euro to come back to Earth to marry her. And well, of course, this sounds a little bit funny. It also proves how good scammers are at marketing. They are able to convince us with any event, any crisis, and any trend that we can be scammed. And they're just great marketeers. And that's something we have to consider, that it's really getting very difficult to recognize scams from the truth. And scammers are also vicious. A few years ago, in the state of Texas, a new law was applied where it was no longer legal to buy abortion pills. And 3 months before this legislation came into effect, the scammers were already setting up websites offering abortion pills and especially targeting young female women from Texas. And the problem was, it's not only stopped when these ladies bought a product on these websites, it then became extortion, saying, if you don't send us more money or do other things for us, we will tell your friends and families that you tried to buy an abortion pill. So it's really, really, really a vicious criminals. We often get the question how big online scams are. And every year we do a survey amongst 50,000 plus consumers worldwide, asking them about their scam experience. And one of the biggest challenges we, I think, as humanity have is that we believe that we're good at recognizing scams. We're not. 76% of the global population believes that they're either or says they're confident or very confident that they're able to recognize scams. But then a few questions later, many of us admit, well, yes, in the last 12 months, I did lose money or I did click on a link giving away personal information to a criminal. So there's a huge gap between our trust in ourselves to recognize scams and the reality. We also see that the frequency with which we are being approached increases rapidly. Um, Most of us now receive at least one scam attempt every week via email, Facebook, WhatsApp, a text message. And that frequency is increasing every year. To also highlight some positive news, we also asked consumers this year to what extent they are aware that artificial intelligence can be used to scam you. And the good news is that most people now know that a text message can be created by artificial intelligence, or a dialogue on Facebook, or a picture, or a video. So there is now also general awareness that this is actually possible. For the record, we're still being scammed mostly by traditional media. Text message and phone calls are still the most common ways to scam us, followed very closely by email and instant messaging apps and social media postings. Um, Interestingly enough, across the world, online shopping scams are by far the most kind of scam, followed either by investment scams or identity theft on number two and number three. So the most popular scam are online shopping scams, and then depending on the country, either people fall more for investment scams or identity theft. But across the world, this is clearly our top three. We also see that most scams are actually being executed very quickly. Within a few minutes, you lose money or you lose information. But in many cases, actually, a scam can take a very long time. We've heard examples of a scam where, especially investment scams, where people are paying for years and years and years, and the scammer continues to be able to get money from the victim. Interestingly enough, in most countries, people still rely on themselves to recognize, hey, this is not right, it's a scam. There is an interesting difference. In the United Kingdom, increasingly banks are making consumers aware or about that, hey, you might be being scammed at the moment. And I'm very sure that has to do also with the changing legislation in the UK. International and especially more in Asian countries, we see that family and friends have a way more important role. Family and friends are informing victims that this is not good. You might be getting scammed at the moment. That's something we might actually could learn from these countries. Um, we also ask how victims are being paid, and there I think no surprise, bank transfer on number one, followed very closely by credit card. What we see happening, especially in countries with high inflation ratio and weak currencies, is that cryptocurrency is one of the major ways to scam people. We also asked why did you become a victim of a scam? What happened? And there, the number one reason is simply the offer. The offer sounded very good, and they went for it. Second reason is very interested. I acted too fast. So we're pushing very much for awareness campaigns where the first thing we say is stop, wait, take time to think. Because we know that the more time we give ourselves to think about it, the more time we get to say, well, this is not right. The second thing we're emphasizing, check with friends and family. Because the more brain power you have at looking at the offer, the more likely you are saying, this is not right, this might be a scam. Because one of the third reason is people simply do not see the deceit or do not have the knowledge. And by involving friends and family, there's a higher chance of us not becoming victim of a scam. We also asked why people are reporting less and less scams. It's a huge issue. And the main reason is simply they think it doesn't make a difference. And to some extent, they're right. In my own country, the Netherlands, 95% of the cases reported to law enforcement, the police is very honest. They say the scammer is abroad, the amount lost is rather low. We're sorry, but we will not be able to catch the scammer. We're not going to do anything. And at least they're honest, despite the fact that it's, of course, terrible to hear that the criminal will not be caught. Other reasons are that reporting is too complicated or people do not know where to report. We often get questions, should I report with the bank, the telecom operator, the social media platform, the law enforcement agency in the country where the scammer might be operating? We're not giving enough guidance to people to where to report the scam. To give a complete picture, it's not only the fault of stakeholders like the telecom operators, social media, banks. I think it's really a shared responsibility that we fight scammers more, and that includes consumers. One of the questions we added this year is if we send you 20,000 US dollars and you are allowed to keep 1,000, would you send the remaining 19,000 to another bank account? This is a basic money mule activity, and especially young males are falling for this. And unfortunately, across the globe, 8% or 7% of the people said, yes, I would accept it, or even worse, I would accept it and not send it further, which is basically also stealing. So there's also a responsibility with us as consumers to not help cyber criminals. So if we add up all the amounts lost reported by the over 50,000 consumers we interviewed worldwide, as Andy was saying, we end up with an amount of 1 trillion US dollars, which is 1% of global GDP lost in scams and fraud worldwide. What's interesting is, well, I know many people in the United Kingdom and in Europe and in America are saying we're being scammed, which is true. The problem actually is way, way worse in developing nations like Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Southeast Asia. The corona epidemic pushed a lot of people towards the internet with very little knowledge about how the internet works, and they're now falling massively victim to scammers for, yes, very small amounts often, but in the end, a huge portion of their country's GDP. So as I said, we're only seeing tip of the iceberg, and reporting is really becoming a major issue because consumers believe that it doesn't help in the end. But that's actually a very troublesome development because law enforcement needs these reports to aggregate data and get and roll up scam networks. So it's a big concern I have. We now see that online scams are, as Andy was saying, either the number one or number two most reported type of crime in most countries. In the UK, this percentage is 38%. In Singapore, where we just held our last summit, law enforcement stated that 70% of what's being reported into the Singaporean police is actually related to online fraud and scams. An incredible number. And we see that I think we're really only at the beginning. And I want to give you an example. The presentation is not going well. I received an email from the International Trust and Fraud Intervention Association saying that we reported them on Scam Advisor as high risk, and they were going to sue us if we did not remove that. I did some investigation, and all the pictures you see are fake. They replace the name of the actual check with the name of the International Trust Foundation, Fraud and Intervention Association. All the profiles of their team are not to be found on LinkedIn, and their company registration, they did officially register in California, but on the website they claim to be 50 years old. What's the scam? I don't know for sure, but it looks like they're approaching victims, telling them that they can receive a compensation for their scam, but they do need to give financial information to help them. And my fear is that many victims are falling for this kind of scam. And we are trying to take down the website, but until now, we did not get far. And this website is still live. A month after we've discovered it, we contacted several authorities, and nothing is happening yet. Scammers are getting really more professional. So, one of the examples I find is the International Financial Market Relations Regulation Center. Sounds very official, and on their website, you can find 50 websites which have been officially certified as legit investment and cryptocurrency websites. We all, however, think that each of these websites is very high risk because they offer very high return on investments. And this website we've also tried to take down. It's based from Russia, and we don't have any success. In Nigeria, when one of our colleagues is living, she shared with us that there's a big social debate going on. Many parents in Nigeria currently advise their children to not go to school, but they'll go to scam school because at least then you will earn money. And of course, it's very easy from our perspective to say, well, that's terrible. But I do understand that if you are living in poverty and you need to make a living, then you advise your children where they can actually earn money. And there's this huge social debate going on in Nigeria. Is this the way we want to go as a nation? Another development is that scams are being democratized. For £70, I can buy a very professional looking banking website or investment website. It's up and running within a day, and I can start scamming people. So the technology to scam people has gone mainstream. You can even Google for it. If you Google for fake investment banking website, I'm sure you will find providers of these services online. Another development we see is the rise of the scam compounds. We already know about in Nigeria, certain villages specializing in advanced fee fraud. In Ghana, there is a village which specializes in puppy scams, dogs being offered online but never delivered. And now we see the rise of scam compounds where people in Southeast Asia are being lured to countries like Bangladesh and Myanmar with great office work, good pay behind the desk. But once people arrive there, their passports are taken from them and they're being forced to scam for 12 hours a day. And if you don't scam, you're beaten up. So it's not a voluntary service. It's really a prison where people are being held. And you see here a picture of how big these compounds can be. According to the United Nations, they estimate that between 200 and 300,000 people are being held hostage in these kind of scam compounds. Another challenge is that scams are becoming unrecognizable. So this is a nice example where a scammer used artificial intelligence to merge flowers with kittens, creating this product which does not exist. And he was very smart. He offered it on Facebook and other social media, saying that the seeds will take 6 months to blossom, giving him 6 months to continue scamming people until they found out that the seeds which were delivered have nothing to do with the flowers being shown. And of course, we see the rise of deep fakes, like the speech of Christine Lagarde, where she is promising every European a passive income of 2,100 euros. And of course, it's fake. Or romance scammers who are using technology. And here you see what the victim is seeing. And this is actually the real gentleman. They use deepfake to set up romance scams and convince victims to pay. So my unfortunate conclusion is that at the moment scammers are winning. It has become organized crime where in specific villages, in specific countries, they specialize in one kind of crime and get better and better and better at it. So for example, in Israel, we know there are two companies who specialize in money recovering. They buy data of investment scam victims on the dark web and then start to approach these victims with, hey, we can help you recover your money. And actually, maybe we already have your money. You just need to pay an administration fee or taxes or another fee. In the end, the victim never gets his money, and he's actually becoming a victim again. In Cyprus, there's a company which every day turns out new subscription scams. The template is always the same. They just every day change the name of the website. And in the Netherlands, my own country, we unfortunately have a very bad reputation for bulletproof hosting, meaning we're being used by many criminals to host criminal websites because they know that if you host in the Netherlands, it takes a very long time to take action to take these websites down because of our freedom of speech legislation. So to summarize, in the UK, 38% of all crime now reported is related to fraud, mainly online fraud, and only 2.5% prosecuted. Globally, the World Economic Forum estimates 0.05% of all cybercriminals are actually being prosecuted. And that doesn't mean they're ending up behind bars, they're only being prosecuted. So how can we turn the tide? I do believe in awareness, but it's not the silver bullet. We know from recent research that if you make a person more aware about cybercrime and scams, he becomes more confident. And because he becomes more confident, he's also taking more risks. And I really believe that despite the fact that you can be very educated, like myself, in scams, you still can get scammed. I got scammed 3 weeks ago. I needed to travel for a lecture to Eastern Europe. I was tired. I left the airport. I took a taxi. He drove me to the hotel. He asked for 25 euros. I paid him. I went into the hotel and then I remembered, wait, there was a big sign, 8 euros from the airport to the center. I was tired. I did not pay attention and I got scammed. And it can happen to all of us when we're tired, not paying attention, under duress, and the scammers are just getting too good. The scams are more and more difficult to recognize. So what we're trying to do is we try to recognize that scams are a global problem which needs to be solved on a global level. Because all the smart scammers always operate across the border, knowing that their chances of getting caught are very, very slim. So we're trying to bring together all the stakeholders, law enforcement, governments, telecom operators, banks, the big tech companies, and the consumer to find better solutions to protect ourselves against scams. And we do that by intelligence sharing. We have regular meetups. We have free summits every year. One actually is going to be in London on very likely the 26th of March 2025. So if you're interested to join, please let me know. You're very welcome. And the other two are in Asia and Washington DC to bring together all the stakeholders. As you know, we're also doing a lot of research, and we recently launched the Global Signal Exchange because we not only want to be a network to share intelligence, we also want to realize concrete facts. Because at the moment, cybercrime is being followed. Oh, that's a little bit too loud. Sorry about that. We're trying to fight cybercrime by whack them all, taking down websites, taking down servers. That's not working because for a criminal, it takes seconds to set up the next server or seconds to set up the next website. Taking down these endpoints doesn't work. We have to get to the criminal himself. And we're doing that by gathering as much cybercrime related data as possible, and we're putting that in one big database to share intelligence on scams and make more, allow platforms to see where cybercrime is happening on their platform, be it social media or hosting company, but also to create leaderboards. So we are creating leaderboards where it becomes more visible which companies facilitating internet services are doing a great job to fight abuse and which ones really need to do more. So to give you an example based on the current data we have, and this is illustrative, .dk, the Danish registry, has 1.3 million domains under management, and 0.03% of those domains are spam, scam, phishing, malware. It's impossible for any platform to prevent any kind of abuse. So I think they're doing a very good job. At the bottom, based on our data, we find the .top domain name with 2 million domains under management and 9% of it being having received signals for scam, spam, phishing, malware, etc. That's 300 times the Danish registry. So we're inviting the internet industry to take an example of what Denmark is doing, and hopefully many who are at the bottom of our list can improve, and we're very willing to help them. The global signal exchange is now supported by several players like Google, Amazon, and we're adding more on a day-to-day basis. But we're offering other solutions as well. In the UK, we are working together with GetSafe Online and Cyfes, and we offer a simple tool where consumers can check, is this website legit or does it have risks involved? And we're now live in 15 countries where people can check if a website is legit, but also download a browser extension to stay safe on their computer or laptop. And we're currently developing a mobile app as well to protect users on their mobile phone, that if they're clicking on a phishing link, they get a warning, hey, this might be a scam. Are you sure you want to continue? So with that, I would like to conclude and open the floor for questions and debate. Andy, may I give you the floor again?
Thank you very much indeed, George. That really was absolutely excellent. So much information so clearly in such a short period of time. Can we please show our appreciation to George before we move on? That really was excellent.
Thank you.
You do an outstanding job, George, to share your intelligence with us. I'm just going to stop sharing your screen here, if you bear with me. Stop participant sharing. Okay, lovely. That really was excellent. If you don't mind, George, I'm going to put a few thoughts and comments and questions to you, then we'll open it right up. Okay, so as I indicated at the beginning of our conversation tonight, we have become increasingly focused on what the regulators are doing. We, of course, fully accept that the regulators have got a very tough and challenging job to do. Are there any regulators, and by the way, please don't say the UK, are there any regulators around the world that you think are actually doing a pretty good job where other regulators could perhaps try to learn from them about what they're doing? Are there any regulatory agencies or other enforcement agencies that you've become quite impressed by?
Yes, and as you know, compared to many other countries, I do think that UK is not doing a bad job. But we see some other countries also picking up the pace. And I want to give two examples. Singapore is a very small country, as you know. They're surrounded by countries which are very poor. And as a result, they have been bombarded by scammers trying to get money from the Singaporeans. And they're taking several measures. And some of them might go quite far. So one of the newest legislations allows law enforcement to block a bank account without the approval of the bank account owner and without the approval of the bank itself, because they are seeing that there are malicious activities. So that's something debatable. It goes quite far. I do believe that the Singaporeans themselves are very happy with this legislation. They trust the government a lot. But the Singaporean government not only followed in the footsteps of the UK in making banks more responsible, they're taking it way farther. We've also now making telecom operators more responsible, and also social media. So they're really trying to share responsibility of scam fighting across the entire chain. And they're also helping consumers. So they developed a mobile app, much one we're now also developing, allowing giving consumers more protection, etc. And another interesting country is Belgium. In Belgium, consumers are able to send phishing mails and scam emails to one email address. You also have it in the UK. What's different, what's being done in Belgium, is that there's a real-time analysis of all those phishing emails, and they use our data, amongst others, to check, is this link in this email a scam or phishing activity?
Right.
If they think it is, within 5 minutes, that link is sent to all the Belgium internet access providers, and they then put them on the block list. That's going quite far. In the Netherlands, this would not be approved because it's considered, how do you say in English, censorship.
Yeah.
Um, but in Belgium, it was approved. And very honestly, I'm a big fan of it because they're very careful in blocking websites, and they do block websites which are clearly scams, and as a result are protecting Belgium citizens. Another initiative is what's now happening in Australia, where they set up the National Anti-Scam Center, and they're really working very closely together with the banks and telecom operators to real-time share data on scams and protecting consumers better. So there are other examples, but I'm sorry, Andy, your government is also doing quite a lot if you compare to many other nations.
I understand. Thank you very much, DJRH. Thank you. Well, one further comment from myself. We get particularly frustrated, and obviously I'm not going to mention any actual individuals' names here, but we get particularly frustrated when there is somebody who is accepted to be a scammer, somebody who is known to be a scammer. For example, somebody who may be involved with pension scams for many, many years. And despite it would appear the best efforts of the authorities, there are scammers who've been operating for 7, 8, 9, 10 years and are still operating. And they always seem to be able to, we use the phrase, to dance rings around the authorities, or almost taking the taking the mick, as we would say in England, about their ability to stay one step ahead of the authorities. Really frustrating. And it's especially frustrating if, for example, a whistleblower tells a regulator that this is happening, something is going on here that shouldn't be, please investigate, please close it down, please send in the troops, as it were, and they don't take action. This is particularly frustrating. Is it just the UK that's experiencing what seems to be lax responses from regulators, or is that a worldwide phenomenon as well?
No, it is unfortunately a global issue, and scammers are very smart at
Yeah,
using the loopholes in legislation. And I recently spoke to a German prosecutor. He was prosecuting scammers because they had proof that they scammed free people in an investment scam in Germany. But he actually knew that another 20 people were scammed in Austria with same scam by the same scammers.
yeah,
But they were not allowed to take this in consideration in a German court because that offense was done in Austria and it's not valid in a German court. So even in the European Union, we are yet to harmonize this kind of crime. We recognize that the criminal is operating in dozens of countries, and we should add it all together. So we have the problem is we in the year 2000 we saw already coming that our economy is digitizing. We didn't consider that crime is digitizing just as rapidly. And very honestly, I really believe that cybercrime in amount of money being lost is now bigger than normal crime. But we have 2 or 3% of our law enforcement focused on cybercrime. We
yeah,
still have to make the switch.
yeah. But thank you, thank you. One final comment from myself. Then we'll
Please.
go to everyone else. So I'm particularly keen to hear from whoever would like to chip in. For example, I know we've got Paul Greenwood with us tonight. Paul deals mostly with helping to protect elderly, vulnerable people. So maybe Paul's got a particular perspective he'd like to share. We've got Mark Bannister with us, who has strong opinions about the way the banks tend to be behind the curve on protecting consumers from harm. We've got lots of people here tonight who may want to chip in to the conversation. So, folks, please get ready to do so. Um, you touched on the lack of resource. In the UK, I believe I'm right in saying that under 2% of police resources goes towards tackling fraud and financial crime, even though it accounts for, I think, about 38% of all the crime. So there
Yeah.
seems to be a terrible disconnect there. But in a way, even more worrying than that, um, if we take the HBOS Reading frauds, this is about banks doing very bad things. It cost the police authority, the Thames Valley Police, I think it was about £7 million
Yeah.
to prosecute, and they couldn't get hardly any of that money back from the authorities. The money that was eventually paid by the bank in fines went to, I think it went to the Treasury. So not only do our police forces not have enough money to begin with, if they do spend a lot trying to close down frauds and scams, they don't get it back. So there's a disincentive to operate. I mean, we all know the Charlie Munger quotation, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. It works the other way as well. Show me the disincentive and I'll show you the outcome. If you're a police force, then where is your motivation to chase down these scammers, whether they're in the UK or abroad, if you know it's going to be really expensive for your police force to do it? These are the sorts of structural problems that seem to be there, George, that are really getting in the way of real progress. Any comments to that? Then we'll go to other people with their comments and
Yeah.
questions. Thank you,
I mean,
John.
I speak to a lot of law enforcement officers, and they really, really want to get the criminal. I mean, most of us don't become a law enforcement officer if they don't want to do good. I really think our legislation is killing their motivation, because um, we really have to, and that's painful. I mean, we have to recognize that cyber criminals are operating globally, but our entire legislation framework, we still like to be independent countries. And I really think we have to recognize that we have to give more power to international crime fighting organizations such as Europol and Interpol to start acting. Um, because local law enforcement is a nice example is I spoke to a Belgian police officer, and he was very close to he had identified scammers, and they were Dutch. Um, but the Dutch police said, well, sorry, this is not a priority for us. They're scamming Belgians. We're supposed to protect Dutch citizens.
Mm,
If we keep on thinking that way, the criminal will win. So
absolutely.
law enforcement has to be rewarded for catching criminals independent of which country, which citizen they're protecting, ideally. But that also means that we have to start protecting Chinese citizens, and Chinese police has to protect maybe UK citizens, and we're a long way from that.
Understood. Understood. We could all benefit from far greater international cooperation. I mean, in the UK, the general rule of thumb seems to be that the police force, the regulator, won't even attempt to get involved in trying to recover money if they know there's an international dimension to it. And very, very frequently, of course, there is an international dimension because the bad people doing it know that if you internationalize their endeavors, then they're probably not even going to get investigated, let alone prosecuted. It's a massive problem. And if it's bad now, imagine what it might be like 5, 10, 15 years from now. My goodness me, it's really worrying. We've got some great folks here with us tonight, George. So if I could, I'd like to encourage perhaps Paul Greenwood, Mark Bannister,
Andy,
others
I
to
see a
chip in.
few questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Shall I take those?
We'll open it up to others on the call first, then we'll come
Please.
back to those if that's okay. Paul Greenwood, if you can take yourself off mute, Paul, please take a moment to introduce yourself. I'm obviously very familiar with the great work that you do with helping elderly people not being abused financially. Any particular comments from yourself, Paul? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andy, and thank you, Georgie, for this great webinar. I think 3 years ago, I would have been more pessimistic about what I'm hearing from you and seeing from you. But I really actually being little more optimistic. And I'll tell you why. I spent 22 years prosecuting fraud cases committed against primarily older adults in San Diego. I'm a former British solicitor, but I've been the last 32 years in California. And now I've become more involved in more global outreach for anti-fraud initiatives. And I'm so glad to see, Georgie, that you are familiar with Operation Shamrock, which
Aaron
is
West, yes, of course.
the vision created by a colleague of mine, Aaron West, in the Bay Area, who's now retired from being a prosecutor and who's started this amazing movement, which is touching countries all over the globe, primarily dealing with cryptocurrency frauds and scams. But it's actually motivating detectives in little jurisdictions in places in North America to get more educated about how to follow the money through cryptocurrency blockchain. So I feel there's a movement which has begun all over the world to actually share information. I mean, for example, you gave the example of the German prosecutor who knows about victims in Austria. We should be encouraging these German prosecutors to spend time on the phone with their Austrian counterparts. Okay, I've got the guy in Germany, but I want you to go after the guy in Austria. We can do it. And I think if we do more of that sharing and transparency, it's going to help. Just finally, I want to say that I've been working with an organization in America called AARP, which is basically to do with Retired Persons Association. They are part of they formed a group now, a national fraud database with seed money from Walmart, from Facebook, from Amazon, and together they're launching it in the new year, where they're hoping to collect enough data and enough information that they can then pass over to the federal prosecutors to feel that they have enough ammunition to go after these crooks all over the globe. So things like that really are beginning to excite me. There's one other place called the Aspen Institute. They are starting a whole focus on how do we reduce the number of frauds and scams globally, and particularly in North America. So as I say, 3 years ago, I would have said, yeah, we're dying. But I think now we are at least galvanizing enough people to form a very formidable task force across the globe. And webinars like this will only serve to energize more and more people to do that.
Paul, it's great to hear your positivity about this, and you're very well placed to have a very well qualified opinion. I think the word that you've used a few times there is global. This is definitely one of those problems that has to be approached from a global perspective. Trying to do things locally and colloquially is obviously going to fail. I really buy into what you just said there, Paul. Thank you very much, and thanks for being here. It's nice to see you again, sir. We're going to go to Richard Emery. Richard knows a thing or two about fraud prevention. So, Richard, thank you, Richard.
Hi, George. Can I start off by saying you apologised at the beginning about your use of English. Let me just make this perfectly clear. If we were half as good, or even a fraction as good, in your language and other languages as people in Holland generally are, and you are particularly, we would all get on a whole lot better. So I commend you from that point of view. The other thing which I'm just going to comment on as well, just to comment on what's happening in Holland, is I was very, very critical that in the UK, we did not have confirmation of the payee name when we were making online payments. So I just want to put on record, I know what SurePay have achieved in Holland. And I think it's just an absolute travesty that in the UK, our major banks decided to do their own thing and then do it badly and do it slowly, rather than simply adopt SurePay, which is a far, far superior offering. So just to comment on, there's some stuff going on there, which I commend the Dutch and yourselves.
I'm happy to pass
that.
along your words to SurePay, Richard, and also want to comment on the previous speaker. I am more optimistic. I mean, we have solutions like SurePay. we are slowly raising our defenses and doing more. We will not be unemployed for at least the next 20 years. But I am positive that just like with viruses, I mean, in the 90s, we had a huge problem with computer viruses, and now everybody of us is protected in one way or another against them. But it takes time to raise the defenses, heighten the walls. Sorry, Andy.
No,
So I'm gonna come back with a question in a moment, because something I particularly want to talk about. But I just want to share something else which you may be interested in. That there is, you talked about the globalization of the problem. There is a TV program running in the UK of a small team of people working for the BBC who have hacked into data centers in Pakistan and are actually then identifying the person that they're talking to in the UK and then contacting that person and breaking the chain. And they are reporting these things to the Pakistani authorities, but not seeing any great action from Pakistan, despite the fact that you've clearly got whole teams of people that are originating these scams. So just mention that. But the question that I wanted to come to was, you mentioned the issue of speed. This question of rush, must do it straight away. Now, Andy and some of the others will be aware of the fact that something like 6 years ago, I sat in front of the Treasury Select Committee in Parliament and said, I believe that where somebody makes the first high value payment to a new payee, the bank should automatically hold that payment for 24 hours before they release it to the beneficiary. And the Treasury Select Committee agreed with me, the House of Lords Committee agreed with me, but the banks put two fingers up and said, we're not going to do it. So I'd be interested to know your view on that proposition of saying the faster payment system has facilitated faster fraud. So in this very, very narrow situation of the first high value payment to a new payee, there should be a mandatory delay of 24 hours before the money is released. Your thoughts, George?
I fully agree. Actually curious, what were the arguments of the banks for not doing this?
Well, the first argument I got from the UK Finance, which is the trade body of the banks, was that it wasn't permitted under the payment services regulations because the regulations say the money has to be in the beneficiary's bank account within 2 hours. Now, let me just clarify this. That was a lie, right? Because the point where the 2 hours begins is when the beneficiary's head office gets the money from the payer. They have to put it in the account within 2 hours. The regulations, as is now apparent from some of the other stuff that's come on more recently, the regulations say the payment must be made by the end of the next business day. So it was always permissible, although UK Finance tried to argue, and I'm going to say this, not only did they criticize me on a recorded TV program, but even after I told them they're wrong, we were on a live radio program and they still told me that I was wrong, even though they already knew that they were wrong. So there's a real distance. The argument that they have come forward is people would complain because it's very inconvenient. Now, I've asked the question of hundreds of people in the last 6 years, when was the last time you made a payment to a new payee of more than £500 and did not have their details at least 24 hours before they needed the money? And the answer is consistently silence. There's only been one case in 6 years where somebody said, I needed to go to somebody's home because I was buying a secondhand car. And if I could transfer the money while I was there, I could drive the car away. Well, that's quite simple. You've just got to phone the bank, go through high-level security and get clearance on the payment. So the banks have only ever resisted because they don't want to do it and they're not prepared. I think the problem is they're not prepared to go to the general public and say, this is for your benefit. And that's it. There is no technical reason why they couldn't do it. There's no regulatory reason why they couldn't do it. But ironically, what has just come out in the last few weeks is if the banks suspect a transaction is the result of fraud or deception, the sending bank can now hold the payment for 4 days. And even if they're wrong, if they are wrong, the only cost that they have to bear is loss of interest and bank charges. So there's no consequential loss. So if you get your payment delayed by 4 days when you were paying the solicitor to buy a house, and you lose the house purchase, or you get all sorts of surcharges for breach of contract because you didn't complete on time, the bank says that's not our problem. So we have a little mess. This is one of my challenges that Andy knows about for 2025, is to actually go back and see if we can actually reverse that change. What I would say is the beneficiary bank, who currently only have 2 hours, the beneficiary bank should actually, in a regulatory framework, be given 30 or 48 hours or 72 hours after they receive the money and before they credit the customer's account, if they ever need it. Because if the money comes in and they look at the beneficiary account and say, oh, this is a local firm, this is a firm of solicitors, easy, the money goes straight in. If there is a prompt and they look at it and they go, well, this is odd, this is a student account, and now this is the 4th payment of over £10,000 that's arrived in the last 2 days, maybe we'd better start holding the payments. So at the moment, they don't have an easy way of doing that within the framework. So I think the delay is a good idea, but it's in the wrong place. But value your thoughts on that.
Great stuff, Richard. Thank you. George, your comments on that, and then we'll go to Mark Bannister. Thank you.
Yeah, very honestly, I agree with what Richard is proposing, and we see. I mean, in my own country, the Netherlands, if you want to transfer 2,000 euros or more, you first have to unlock that amount, wait for 4 hours before you can transfer it, and that's also a measure where we are saying pause, hold, and think about it. And I spoke to several banks and banking associations. It seems, Richard, that's at least the one. I haven't spoken to UK Finance, but more banking associations in Europe and Australia, and they seem very much in favor of this now. That if you're transferring a high amount to a new bank account you never did business with, let's pause this and maybe even in some cases contact the consumer. Hey, this is a very suspicious amount. Are you sure you want to transfer this? So I think that just like I believe Paul was commenting, we are seeing some changes. We just need to push harder to accelerate the change.
Can I make the comment before Andy Pansel? Can I just make the comment? In a number of cases I've dealt with, the victim realized they'd been the victim of fraud the moment they put the phone down, or when they woke up the following morning, or when their partner came home from work, but the money's already gone. So it's not just about the banks being able to have a period of time. It's about giving the consumer, and that's why I think it should be mandatory across all high value payments to new payees, because it gives the consumer a chance to come back out of that hot state and to say, it's okay, you will get the money tomorrow. And if that's known, I believe it's to give the consumer a window as well as giving the bank a window.
Yep, I agree.
Very good. Very good stuff, Richard, as always. And thanks, George, for your comments there. Richard, you really are doing amazing work in this space. You really are. Thank you for doing it. We're going to go to Mr. Mark Bannister. Mark.
First of all, thank you very much for your incredible dissertation and explanation on all of this. It leaves me cold, but that's aside. I would like to ask you, where do you think scamming ends and sharp practice begins? Because we see today everybody extolling the virtue of their best offer, etc., etc. And by definition, there can't be more than one best offer, and yet remarkably there are. And it seems to me that a lot of our modern marketing is following the scammers, or perhaps it's the scammers following our modern marketing techniques. I'm not sure which, but I'd be very interested to know where you see the line drawn.
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, Booking.com, I'm not sure if it's also been a case in the UK, but they have been slapped on the hand by communicating to every user, this room is nearly sold out. Somebody else is looking at it right now. Book now, otherwise you will lose it. And there was a lie. It's a tough question, Mark. And I mean, I'm doing sales as well, and part of it is showing things a little bit more in the light sometimes than it is. It's a tough question. I don't have an answer for you. I think it's we see a lot of as I said, scammers are great marketeers, and sometimes great marketeers are becoming scammers. We actually seen it in a few cases, especially in the crypto area, where a crypto initiative started off legit. They really had noble intentions in the crypto space, and then slowly it turned into a scam because they were believing in the dream, and then the dream did not become a reality, and the truth was bended a little bit and more bended, and then it became a scam. So tough one.
That whole concept of sharp practice, as Mark put it, is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, the reality is, and bear with me, I'm just going to share my screen very, very quickly here. The reality is that, we produced this guide, Faces of Financial Crime, Suffering Caused by the Financial Sector. We produced this a couple of years ago. It's full of research. I'll put a link to it in the chat in a minute. And obviously, this is all about people being scammed, and it's built around 22 case studies of real people, real members of the Transparency Task Force, case studies relating to bank scandals, fake insolvency, fraudulent investment schemes, mortgage prisoners, poor financial advice, pension scams, etc., etc. Lots of different types of scams. And throughout the document, we've got pictures representing different sort of thoughts and ideas. And some of these folks represented in the pictures are, criminals, people wearing hoodies. That's like the classic image. I think you had one, George, in one of your first slides.
Yes.
Somebody who's an obvious fraudster wearing a hoodie. But if you look here at the back of it and elsewhere, we've got pictures like this. These people here in an office block. The picture at the bottom right here, professional inverted commas people in let's say a boardroom of a bank cooking up something like interest rate hedging product mis-selling. So this whole concept of scamming and dishonest sales and fraudulent sales, it really does cover quite a cross section of different types of people. The scammer might be somebody in an obscure part of the world, sitting inside some kind of hotbed of scamming activity, like a scam factory in a particular part of the world, somebody who's barely making enough money to feed himself or herself. They're part of an almost industrial process. That's at one extreme. At the other extreme, you've got ultra well paid banking types cooking up all sorts of rather toxic products to sell to unsuspecting victims by promoting the product to them when they aren't going to tell them what the risks are. The classic interest rate hedging product mis-selling type activity. It really is quite a spectrum. We've got Steve Connolly here. Steve will introduce himself shortly. Steve comes from the financial planning world. He runs a holistic financial planning service. It's absolutely first class. I can literally say that myself. I'm having experienced myself. And Steve will know about all kinds of scamming that went on in the banks and all kinds of, dishonest people acting in the financial services space. It's pretty awful. We'll hear from Steve shortly. Does anybody want to come with a comment or a question? Otherwise, we'll go to Steve
Andy,
to introduce himself. Thank you,
Andy.
Mark.
If I can just conclude my commentary,
Yeah.
I would tell you that one of the biggest financial scammers is located at 12 Endeavour Square in London. And I'm, of course, referring to the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. You would think that it does what it says on the tin. In fact, we all know that it does not do what it does on the tin. It does it to the extent it does it limitedly. It does it when it feels like it, on matters that benefit the square mile but do not benefit consumers. We have the FOS, which the Financial Ombudsman Service, which is supposed to protect consumers, and in fact it protects the protagonists of I would say, financial crime and scam that is perpetrated by all the people that are members of it. And we don't protect our consumers. And I slightly despair of the situation that we find ourselves in, where our parliamentarians are as weak as they are. And I can only congratulate you on all the work that the Transparency Task Force and the APPG has recently done in highlighting the issues surrounding the FCA and its competency and legitimacy. Because I would say to you that based on the evidence and the facts, it's just not. And we need to do something about that. And indeed, some of us are engaged in that endeavour.
Mark, thank you. Thank you very much. George, Jean Hayden put a note in the chat about AI. What's that going to be like? I mean, people are talking about AI being used to give you a phone call from somebody who sounds like your son or daughter or relative who's, lost their bank account for the day or something and needs some money. What are your thoughts about where things are going on AI, and how creative could the criminals get through AI, George? And then we'll go to Steve Connolly. I'd like Steve to introduce himself. Thank you, George. Thank you.
I mean, we see AI being applied for all the types of scam. What I learned from our summits in the last year is it's going to be a battle of AI against AI. We see now many cybersecurity companies investing heavily into protecting us from AI scams. Give you an example, Trend Micro developed a plugin into Zoom and Teams, which can recognize, hey, are you talking to a real person? Yes or no. We see Bitdefender offering, as part of their antivirus company, that they're now scanning your email with your permission, for the record. They're scanning your emails and your text messages. Hey, this might be a scam email or a phishing message. So just like as I said before, with computer viruses, more and more protection layers are being built, both on an infrastructure level as well as on a device level. The big challenge, of course, is that we in the West can afford those measures. People in developing countries cannot. So I really think that in the next few years, we will get more and more scam protection, but it will be a battle of AIs picking up our phone first and checking for an unknown number who that is before they actually reach us. That's where we're going.
Scary stuff. Scary stuff. Thank you very much, George. Mr. Steve Connolly, please take a moment to introduce yourself and share any thoughts you have on this particular topic. Thank you.
Yeah, so yes, Steve Connolly. I run a network of experts, financial advisors, planners who don't sell products. So we never touch the money. We kind of sit on the client's side of the table is the way I would describe it. There's over 600 of us now globally. There are actually I've estimated about 1 million global financial planners who don't sell products, who just simply sit on the client side of the table. So I run a network, and I've been helping clients for many years who protecting them from scams in the first place by identifying whether something is safe or it's a scam. And I have actually been using scamadvisor.com for a while now, a number of years, I think, a couple of years at least. But there are some other detective sites as well, but I get a bit worried about the other detective sites, whether they're actually real detective sites or not. So there's antiscamreviews.com, aiscamdetective.com, and others, and I kind of a bit unsure whether they're actually real or not. But it pays to run a report through them. They're not, there's no charge for the report. But I do find that useful. Certainly, scamadvisor.com will be my preference now. So thank you for that steer there. But on the other side is, I was horrified when I came out to the banks into the planning world about 12 years ago to meet customers, and found that nearly most of the people I spoke to had been the victim of an investment scam. Virtually everybody at some point or other. And I was just so shocked, horrified about it. I felt I had to do something about it. So I've been trying to help people, but it is actually very difficult in the UK to help people who have been a victim of a financial crime. It's hard to know what to do, where to send them. Serious SFO, seriously underfunded. 2% of police aren't interested. They say it's not a crime. So it's a civil matter, and they send you to, she gets just sent from pillar to post. And I think it's seriously underfunded the recovery or the investigation into financial crime deliberately by the city, because it doesn't align with the growth objective. London is seen as a capital, financial capital, and it needs to be competitive, etc. And if they made it too difficult, but London is a very big market, it's very easy to hide money. I am actually a CEO of an asset recovery business, but my clients are banks. So banks who have their money stolen, and the people come to London and buy property, and I try to get it back for the banks and repatriate the money to sub-Saharan African banks tend to be my clients. But I do that, but it's very hidden. Because the criminals have got all the money, they spend millions and millions of pounds hiding it. And the people who are trying to identify it have no money or empty pockets, and it's very disproportionate. But also the legislation in the UK makes it very difficult. So you have to be, if you're for profit in the UK and you want to try and get money back for customers, you have to be registered with the Financial Conduct Authority as a recovery agent. You don't have to be registered if you're a not-for-profit. So I've tried being a not-for-profit as well. Unfortunately, you have to identify yourself as the owner of this business, and then the scammers then target you and your family and threaten you. So I've been the subject of threats where I've identified scammers, exposed them, and then I've been threatened, and my family's been threatened, and I've had to step down as CEO of the fraud team, which was the business I was running there, which was not for profit. So it's very, very difficult to try and help people, is what I would say in the UK. Have you got any advice for me, Jorge, how am I best to help the people that come across who've been victims of financial crime?
Oh, I think what you're doing is already great. I mean, yes, I've also been threatened. It's unfortunately part of the job. Sorry?
Have you? I didn't realize that, George. I didn't realize you'd been threatened as well.
No, I mean, if you're active in this industry, you're not making friends alone. But to the previous speaker, I mean, please continue helping victims. And we see many people helping victims to recover funds. One of the big challenges we have is that there are many investigation companies out there, and anybody can call himself a crypto investigator, offer their services. Many of them mean well, but there are unfortunately also many out there which are then scamming the victim again with promises of being able to return the money, but you do have to pay a fee. So I'm very much in favor of, in that sense, of more certification by independent organizations to certify that yes, this is a proven money recovery company. They're licensed. We know who they are. We're keeping track of how they're treating victims. That they have transparent pricing, etc. Sorry, back to you, Andy.
Thank you, George. Well, if there's one thing I'd like to happen, one change, it would be that when people give information to the regulators, it doesn't just seem to fall into some big black hole and nothing happens. The amount of times people get frustrated because they report something, some suspicious activity, and then in the UK they are almost like locked out of the system, and they can't find out what's happened with it or whether the regulator or the enforcement agency is taking action. My understanding is, and I'm no expert, George, but my understanding is that in America, whistleblowers are, first of all, they're financially remunerated if the whistleblower results in money being recovered. And secondly, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, does a really good kind of like relationship management job on them and keeps them informed of progress. And I'm kind of wondering myself that if they can do it in America, why can't we maybe do it in the UK? Is this a topic that comes up in your world, George, where people are frustrated that if they are reporting frauds and financial crime, but they have no idea whether the authorities are actually doing anything about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason why less and less people are reporting crime, because nothing is being done, because the police doesn't have the resources, the knowledge, or the authority to do anything. If you would ask me what should be done in the United Kingdom,
Yeah.
I would love to see Company House stop giving company registrations for £12
Yes. Yes.
because many people outside of the UK don't know, there's no vetting, no due diligence, no checking, and they think that if a company is registered at Companies House in the UK, it must be legit.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to come back to that point in just a little while, because there was a very, very good TV program, a comedy program in the UK called The Outlaws, and I'm going to play this will only take a few minutes. It'll be a nice thing to sort of finish on. I'm going to play this clip because it speaks about Companies House and the issues there. But let me just kind of give you all the context before I actually play it, and we'll end on this after you've given us some final comments, George. Okay. So this is the TV program called Outlaws, and just to set the scene, it's a bunch of people who are getting to know each other, and for reasons I won't go into, it's not relevant. They're thinking of doing something a bit dodgy, and what you're about to hear is the idea about how to go about perpetrating this fraud, this crime. I think you might find it hopefully quite funny, folks. There we go. All right, there we go. George, we're going to go back to you for your final comments, sir, and thank you so much for a very, 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 very good and very extremely informative session. I'll put the link to that in the chat. I think, folks, you might want to share that on social media. Go for it. George, your final comments, sir. Thank you.
I'm going to see if we can use this video to start our summit in London, hopefully on the 26th of March. I have one last request, and I will put my email in the chat. We are looking for a volunteer to share his or her experience as a scam victim for our summit. And the reason why we always start with a victim sharing his or her experience is that we want to make the audience aware, why are we here? And we want to protect consumers more from scams. So if you are interested in sharing your story, I cannot make promises, and we do have to make choices, but I will put my email address in the chat. And if you are maybe willing to share your story, please feel free to contact me. With that, back to you, Andy.
George, that's a lovely idea. We ran a fraud summit in Parliament. I think it was November, and we're going to have another one sometime in March. George, we should talk, because there may be a way to kind of coincide these two events together. There could be a nice bit of teamwork around that. We'll talk further about that. And off the back of the fraud summit, we're talking to some folks in Parliament about a few ideas that might help make a difference. But I personally think the the way this problem is going to be solved is going to be through sharing ideas, sharing data, sharing technology. If we are all equipped with what everybody else has got in our fight against the fraudsters, then we've got a chance. Without it, I guess we haven't. Can we please show our appreciation to George? And can I please ask you, I know Alexandra's not here and Chelsea aren't here, but they've worked so hard all year putting on all the events that we've run. So George, thank you very much indeed, sir. It's been great to have you with us again. We'll look forward to doing this. The Global Scams 2025. We'll do something next year as well. And on that note, folks, we'll end our final event for the year. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. We got through it all. Thank you all very much. Particular thanks to you, George. Thank you. Good night, all.
Thank you very much. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Stay safe and try not to fall for any scams.